Sometimes even good people can make a mistake. And when it happens, it's one of the most intense and emotional experiences of your life. It could be a DUI, or maybe you were in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time. Or perhaps you just did something stupid at the spur of the moment without even thinking, and now you're in trouble with the law. Well, you need experienced legal help right away so you don't become a victim of the criminal justice system. Even good people can make a mistake, and if you, a friend, or a loved one has been accused of a crime, don't make another mistake by hiring the wrong attorney for the kind of help you need. You need to visit toddjohnslaw.com. That's toddjohnslaw.com, and then call Attorney Todd Johns today. Attorney Todd Johns has decades of experience helping good people like you who have made mistakes or bad decisions and will stand by you every step of the way. toddjohnslaw.com.
All right, hello and welcome to That's Enough Out of You. I am your host, Bill Rader. Joining me, my co-host, Sean Kane. Sean, how's it going today? How you doing?
Billy Raids, how you doing, buddy?
My voice is a little worse for wear. After a couple of late gigs this weekend and fighting off a cold.
You're a singing machine, Billy.
What can I tell you? But you're going to be doing most of the talking this episode anyway. So it's an interesting episode because we're going to be talking about two heads of mafia families in areas of the country that you don't normally think about when you think about the organized crime. So
right.
It's interesting. But before we get to that, Sean, just want to quickly mention our Patreon. Please check out our Patreon. Of course, we do an extra episode every week on our Patreon called Speakeasy. That's for our paid subscribers. Sean's constantly bombarding Patreon with articles, and there's all kinds of great conversation going on there. Strongly urge you guys to check it out. If you like this show, we talk, we'll do a lot of kind of insider info on what we're doing, episodes we have coming up, guests we have coming up, and we give you kind of some background on that too. And then we just kind of shoot the bull, Sean, where we talk about stuff that we don't normally touch on in these episodes. So,
and then those articles, Bill, I got the Garrison notes. I'm up to 9 parts on the series I'm doing. And I don't know how many. Who knows? It might be 100 parts when I'm done, Billy.
Well, that's good.
Finding more and more stuff.
Just keep cranking them out. All right, Sean, let's get into it.
Okay, Billy. So today we're going to be talking about two names we talk about all the time, Billy, and that's Carlos Marcello, former the mafia boss in New Orleans, and Santo Trafficante, mafia boss of Florida. And like you said, Bill, not two areas that you would think, when you think about Cosa Nostra, in the mafia, you think of New York,
Absolutely.
You think of the East Coast.
Yeah.
But just to tell everybody the sources I use for this, because a lot of research went into this, Bill. And this ties into our episodes of Giancana and Mayhew and all the other ones. But I used, of course, Jim D'Eugenio a lot, his books and his articles on his Kennys and King. I used a lot of the documentation, declassified files from the CIA, a lot of FBI transcripts. Of course, I used the Garrison notes, Billy. I used George Anastasia is a mob journalist down in Philly. I used him. TJ English, the mob author. I used him for some stuff, even though I don't agree with those guys on everything. Drew Pearson's another one, journalist. Senate subcommittee on organized crime, their report. I used that. William Pepper, the late William Pepper. I used him. The LA Herald, of course, the House Select Committee on Assassinations, notes from there, and Tampa Bay Times, Billy. So a lot of research, Bill. So let's just start with the myths, and let's just break down some of these myths, Bill, because there's so much legend on Marcello and Traficante. And let's pronounce his name. It's not Marcello, Bill. It's pronounced Marcello. So let's get that right, because many people don't get it right.
Right.
But the ultimate legend, Bill, is the threat that, and we said this before, but it's worth repeating, that Carlos Marcello threatened John Kennedy. Okay. And what it was this guy, Ed Becker, this private investigator, said he was at Marcello's farm in Louisiana. And he said a threat, when Kenny's name came up, he said a threat in Sicilian dialect, which is important because I don't know, there's no evidence that Becker would even be able to understand or speak Sicilian. But basically, it was, if you cut the tail off the dog lives. You cut the head off the dog will die. And of course, he's talking about the tail was Bobby Kennedy, the head was John Kennedy. It's a legendary story, Bill. It's become a fact in a lot of circles. The truth is, Bill, it was a complete lie. Okay, and there's two sources on that. Tony Montana, not Scarface, but Tony Montana was a gangster. And Gino Minari we talked about him before, Bill. He was a Las Vegas guy that worked in the casinos, not a mob guy. He was Italian, though, and he was friends with a lot of these guys. And one of his good friends was Carlos Marcello. And he said that when Marcello was released early from prison and he went to see him, the guy Becker was there. And this was the first time that Becker ever met Marcello. Now, how could he have heard him say that at 63, Billy, if he's just meeting him and this was 93? So he didn't meet him till 30 years later. So, and then Tony Montana backed that up. There was other things that Becker wasn't even in Louisiana at the time. The thing about speaking Sicilian, that don't make sense. So that whole thing was a legend, Bill. It's not the truth. And there was another threat that supposedly Santo Traficante made to this guy, Jose Aleman, who was an anti-Castro Cuban. And what he said, Bill, is he said basically to Traficante that something about Kennedy, and Santos said, no, he's going to be hit. Okay. And here's the thing, Bill. So Santo was asked about this when he was called to testify. And he, of course, he said that he talked to Aleman only in Spanish because Santos was fluent in Spanish, Billy, down there in Miami and working in the casinos. He was huge in the casinos in Cuba. So he said, since he only spoke that to Aleman in Spanish, there's no way to say that phrase, he's going to be hit, and make it mean what it means in Spanish. That's number one. Number two is, Bill, Jose Aleman was an FBI informant. When Bobby Kennedy stopped a lot of these, shut down the camps and everything, and the Cubans, the anti-Castro Cubans, Aleman testified against a lot of his, fellow countrymen there in the anti-Castro community. Santos knew that. He was plugged into the community, Bill. So you're telling me that Santos Traficante, one of the smartest mob bosses, never spent a day in prison, is going to admit to an FBI informant that he knows is an FBI informant, Bill. He's going to tell him, yeah, we're going to hit Kennedy. Like, come on, Bill. That's just crap. And these other threats, supposedly that Marcello made, one was there's supposedly a law enforcement tapes, and a guy by the name of Gus Russo, I think, was the guy that reported that. Well, Jim DiEugenio, who we had on the show many times, and Bill Davey, who we had on the show, they went to actually talk to the investigators, Bill. And the investigators told them that they heard on the tapes, Marcello's not even mentioned. Has nothing to do with Marcello. So that's another legend. The other ones are these prison threats that Marcello supposedly met. He told to people that he was involved in Kennedy when he was killing Kennedy when he was in prison. Problem with that is, Bill, when Marcello goes to prison, he's at the onset of dementia. Okay. And he was talking nonsense. He was having hallucinations. And then you have a lot of these guys in prison that were getting reduced sentences for saying this stuff and everything. So I don't buy any of those threats. That's a bunch of crap. And some of the other myths, Bill, like the mob did it guys like John Davis, the late John Davis, who tries to tie everything to Marcello. He was the mastermind of the Kennedy assassination. They try to say that Oswald's uncle, a guy by the name of Dutz Merritt, was a Marcello bookie. Now, calling him a Marcello bookie, Bill, is such a stretch because did the guy book games? Yeah, probably. He had a restaurant there. He probably booked games. But to say he was a Marcello bookie, I don't even know. I couldn't even find evidence that he was being shaken down by Marcello organization. So to call him a Marcello bookie and say that he was part of the Marcello organization is such a stretch, and it's just total nonsense, Bill. And it's the same thing with when they say, well, Guy Bannister and David Ferry worked for Marcello. Well, no, he worked for Marcello's lawyer, G. Ray Gill. Okay, and there's not, and I looked in the Garrison notes, I put in an article on Patreon, there's not a lot of direct evidence tying Marcello to Bannister and Farry. It's true as lawyer. Okay, so you got to clear that up. The other thing is the mob lawyer Frank Regano. He says that Marcello and Traficante hit Kennedy, and he delivered the note from Jimmy Hoffa that said that Hoffa wanted Kennedy killed. Well, first of all, Hoffa doesn't tell the mafia what to do. That's not the arrangement. That's not the way it worked. So I don't believe Frank Regano. And this is the problem, Bill. All these sources, like if you're going to believe anything on the mafia, you got to believe that, these, you got to believe these sources that come from people who are known liars, ex-mob guys, Hollywood people that their career has ended and they want to get 15 minutes of fame back.
Right.
And I just don't believe that crap, Bill. We want to identify the truth. So we don't get into a lot of that nonsense, Billy. So the other myth, Bill, and I want to cover this quickly, but the other thing is about Jim Garrison, though, because there's a lot of information. They try to tell you that Jim Garrison was on the take. He was he was working for Marcello, this and that. First of all, Marcello was from Jefferson. He lived in Jefferson Parish. That's outside of Garrison's jurisdiction as district attorney. So for him to open up an investigation against Marcello, he's stepping on somebody else's toes, Billy. The other thing is that businesses that Marcello ran inside of New Orleans, inside Garrison's jurisdiction, Garrison did take them down. So that's not true that he was protecting Marcello. And the other thing is Garrison never said that he didn't think the mafia was involved in Kennedy's assassination. What he said is it was at a lower level. He always thought it was the CIA, the anti-Castro Cubans carried it out, and then when they wanted to silence Oswald, they went to the mob, the CIA went to the mob to bring pressure on Ruby. That's what Garrison believed. So there's that myth, Billy. So we got that cleared up. Anything before we go on, buddy?
No, let's keep going.
So let's start with Santo Trafficante Jr. Okay, so he was part of, what's called the Sun Belt Mafia down there, Billy, which was basically the Dallas LCN, Joe Civello, which is another myth, Bill, that Dallas was actually a satellite of New Orleans. That's not true. Dallas had their own LCN family that's established in the FBI files. But the Sunbelt Mafia is basically Traficante, Marcello, and Civello. But there's also, we got to talk about the Dixie Mafia, Bill, because a lot of people confuse the Dixie Mafia with these Southern Cosa Nostra bosses. Dixie
Right.
Mafia has nothing to do with Cosa Nostra.
Right.
Think of it as like a hillbilly mafia, Bill, like the sophisticated rednecks. Let's call it that, Bill. They're WASP mafia is what it is.
Right.
Work with these guys. They have a strong connection to Marcello, to Traficante. And if anybody's watching Tulsa King, the character that Robert Patrick is playing, that's the Dixie Mafia. So that's, they work with Cosa Nostra, but they're not Cosa Nostra. So Santo Traficante, born in 1914, he takes over the Miami Tampa LCN. So the Cosa Nostra in Florida really was centered in Tampa and Miami. He takes it over from his dad, who was a Sicilian-born gangster. And basically, 1954, he runs that family until his death in 1987. It was kind of an open territory, though, Bill, because Winter Hill in Boston had operations down there at the racetracks and different things. New York families, Genovese, Gambino's down there. Philly mob had crews down there, and they would all work with Traficante, Bill, and that's where Traficante's power came from, because both of these families are very small, Bill. Traficante didn't have a large family, either did Marcello. And remember what we had RJ Roger on, and he was talking about when he was talking about the Louisiana Mafia, how they only had 6 members. Remember? He said
That's
that.
right. That's right. Yeah.
Now, Marcello, when he was in power, he had more than 6 members. RJ's probably talking about later on, but still, it was a very small family, both of them built. But Santo builds relationships with the Sunbelt Mafia, with the Dixie Mafia, and his mentor basically is Tommy Lucchese in New York. One of the 5 families is the Lucchese family. And Santos was always involved in a huge drug network because he's down there in Miami, Bill, and we're going to talk about this operation he has later on involving the CIA and stuff. But he's also very close with Meyer Lansky because Lansky's running operations in Cuba, and so Santos. He's also close to Angelo Bruno in Philly, Russell Buffalino in Pittston, and of course Tony Accardo and Sam Giancana in Chicago. Very close relationship. Now, with Trafficante, one of his biggest earnings, Bill, he ran a lottery down there called the Bolita, and that's Spanish for little ball. And basically, it's 100 balls with numbers, and they put in a bag, and they pick the number, and if you guess the right number, you win. And there was big money then, Bill, in the very, the middle class communities, the poor communities, out through Florida, Billy. So he was making a lot of money on that. And then he gets into Cuba, Bill, and that's where he really makes his money. And he's tied to a guy by the name of Eladio del Valle a little bit, who was a Cuban politician originally, and he gets involved with the anti-Castro Cubans. He gets involved with the CIA. Now, you're going to remember that name, Bill, because Eladio del Valle is killed the same day that David Ferry dies. And remember, Ferry tells Garrison about Del Valle, and as soon as Garrison realizes that Ferry's dead, he tries to locate Eladio del Valle.
That's right.
He's been shot, he's been stabbed, he's been hacked up with a machete, Bill.
Oh, right.
So they really did a number on him. But anyway, Santos gets into Cuba, but originally his father's the one that got into Cuba, Santos Sr., and he would pass it on to his son. And they had an arrangement with Bautista when he was there, Bill, because Bautista was really corrupt. He was running a corrupt regime. And then, of course, when Castro takes over, he throws the mob out, closes the casinos. And the point man with Santos was Meyer Lansky. So Santos and Lansky are basically the point man in Cuba with the entire syndicate, Bill. And we talked about all the mob bosses, even guys like Oni Madden had money in there. All these guys were invested in these casinos, but Santo and Meyer Lansky are the key guys. They're the key contacts. Of course, he's at Appalachian, the meeting. He's apprehended there, but the conviction was overturned, Bill. And again, Santos, I don't think he might have spent like one day overnight in jail, but never spent any jail time. Very cagey boss. And one of his key guys, Bill, was a guy by the name of Lewis MCWillie. Now, I didn't want to call him Lewis MCWillie a gangster. He was an Irish Jewish guy, and he was more, I call him a professional gambler, okay? And he started in Memphis, Tennessee. Then he moved to Jackson, Mississippi, and eventually Dallas, Texas. And he becomes really good friends with Jack Ruby. In fact, Ruby idolizes MCWillie, okay? And eventually, McWillie moves to Miami, and that's where he gets noticed by Santos and by Meyer Lansky. And they give him a job running the casinos in Cuba with John Martino as his muscle. Now, we talked about John Martino before, cousin of Angelo Bruno in Philly, involved with the anti-Castro Cubans. A lot of the information comes from him. I don't believe a lot of what he says because he told so many lies, Bill. I don't know what to make, what's the truth that he told. But anyway, he's the muscle, and they report, McWillie reports to Santos and to Meyer Lansky. And then Castro takes over from Batista, and he throws everybody out. Those guys are arrested. When Castro closes all the casinos, the rumor is that when Santos got arrested down in Cuba, that David Ferry flew to Cuba and got Santos out and flew him back. And there was also reports that Jack Ruby visited Santos when he was in prison. Again, but a lot of that stuff comes from people like John Martino. I couldn't really source it to say that that's a fact. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that really happened. I don't know. But eventually what happens is after the whole thing in Cuba blows up, Santos and Meyer Lansky send McWillie to Vegas, and he runs the Cal Naval Lodge in Nevada. And we talked about that. I put up an article on the Patreon about the truth about the Cal Naval Lodge, because there's the legend about Marilyn Monroe and the Weekend from Hell. And we put the truth up on Patreon if anybody wants to read that. But the thing is, if a lot of people believe that the CIA went to the mafia to take out Lee Harvey Oswald and have Ruby do it, and if they were going to do it, the way to do it would be to go to Santos Traficante. He would go to Lewis McWillie, who was close to Jack Ruby. So did that happen? Possibly, but there's other ways they could have did it. They could have did it David Phillips through Gordon McClendon, who was a big Dallas radio guy there, who was close to Jack Ruby. Ruby had a lot of friends, so it's not necessarily the truth. But here's one thing that's interesting, Bill. November 17th in 1963, Ruby's seen with McWillie by witnesses at the Thunderbird Casino in Vegas. Okay, and when he goes out there, he's got financial problems. When he comes back and returns to Dallas, he's no longer has those financial problems. He's rolling in the money and he's able to pay back taxes because they're after him for back taxes. The IRS was after him. Now the thing is, Bill, that doesn't to me that doesn't prove that McWillie was have him involved in the plot to kill Oswald, because remember, we always said that Ruby killing Oswald is a contingency plan. It only happened because Oswald was supposed to be killed earlier. He's alive. Now they got a problem, so they need a quick fix to take him out.
Right.
So it makes no sense that they're going to pay him earlier, you know what I mean, to do something they don't even know they're going to do. So, he was close with McWillie. So it's not, hard to believe that McWillie would loan him money because they did a lot of work together. So then we get into the Castro plots, Bill. And of course, we're not going to rehash everything. We know we talked about this. Phase one is when, the mafia, Robert Mayhew goes to Roselli, goes to Giancana. Giancana brings in Santo Trafficante. He's a little active in phase one. He gives a pill to a guy by the name of Tony Verona to kind of poison Castro. But then phase two, those guys are shut out. It's basically Harvey and Roselli. Okay. So then later on, when Santos is called to the House Select Committee on Assassinations, he's called to testify, and they asked him. I told you they asked him about the Alaman claim about the hit on Kennedy. He denies that, but he admits to working for the CIA, Bill. But he says that he never was involved in killing Castro. That was never part of the plan. He said he was only involved as an interpreter because he knew Spanish and he was fluent in Spanish. So he said the CIA went to him to talk to the Cubans so they could communicate back and forth. And that's what Santos said, Billy. Let's see, and that's what he says his role was. Now, the interesting thing, Bill, is after that, you have the period where all these people are killed. Okay, and we talked about that. Giancana, Roselli, all these guys are killed. Why is Santos not killed? Okay. But he really didn't say anything. Like he did testify, and he didn't rat the CIA out. He just said he was an interpreter. So he didn't say nothing that really incriminate anybody. But I think, Billy, he was still useful to the agency, where guys like Giancana weren't anymore. Okay. And where he was useful, Bill, and I think later on, maybe when Santos gets in some legal trouble over the Donnie Brasco thing, right? Because remember, Santos gets wrapped up in that.
That's right.
Then all of a sudden he has a heart attack, Bill. So did he have one of them CIA heart attacks in 87? Who knows? Anything is possible when they come out with a heart attack gun. But anyway, here's what I think is Santos's really his involvement with the CIA. It was in the Golden Triangle, in the drug operations they had in Southeast Asia. So in the CIA files, the FBI files, Bill, they mentioned that Santos runs a huge drug operation and that he travels to Saigon and Hong Kong frequently in 1968. And he's meeting with the Corsican syndicate supplying the international narcotics market. Now, the Corsicans, Bill, are out of Marseille in France. That connects now to a little bit to the OAS and Sucre, and a little bit to a guy by the name of Lucien Sarti, whose name came up in a conspiracy theory that he was the one guy that shot Kennedy from the grassy knoll. That's been discredited, but it is important that this connection, this French connection, in the narcotics market, is definitely there, and it's involving the CIA and it's involving Santos. And then the reports, Bill, it's interesting when the FBI has the reports. It's about their investigation into that. The CIA reports are more like a progress report, Bill. It's like you would write to your boss, like, hey, I'm doing this project for you, and here's my progress on it. So it's like CIA's protected this network, Bill. They're not trying to shut it down. And then there's an FBI report. Santos in '68, he meets with Humberto Rojas, who introduces him to Ecuadorian government officials, and they're stretching this to Ecuador. They got officials on the takedown there. Rojas then goes to Nicaragua. He meets with military officials there. So, Bill, you can see this is a huge international, similar to what CIA's got going on with Giancana in Mexico, Bill. Okay. Now, here's what I found, Bill, that's really interesting. I found a letter from a U.S. Senator by the name of Jeremiah Dento to CIA Director William Casey. Okay. And Casey was, Reagan's CIA director, very checkered past, connected guy, very powerful. Everybody knows William Casey. And he would later come up in a lot of corruption scandals. But anyway, this letter was concerning allegations that the CIA was involved in organized crime drug operations. And basically, it was an article, Bill, and it said on the top, it said, please review. And it was from the Nation, is the outlet, and it accused the CIA of partnering with Santo Trafficante and the drug empire. Now, if CIA wasn't involved, you think their response would be, Casey would say, well, this is garbage. We got to get out here and say this is, never denies it. Never says, his response is, how do we react to this? How do we handle this? And basically, how do we sweep it under the rug? You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
it's very
Sure.
interesting, Bill. And then later on, well, let's talk about the network, Bill. Let's talk about any questions before I talk about the network?
Just real quick, going back to the Donnie Brasco thing, that was when they went down to Florida,
Yes.
and they were on the Abscam boat. Is that
Yep,
right?
that's
Okay.
it. That's the whole thing. And remember, Santos is even in the movie, Bill, in the Donnie Brasco movie, if you
Okay.
remember. They have him ratting out. Remember, he's calling Sonny Red. Remember in the Capo, Sonny Black and Sonny Red, they get into it.
Right.
He was ratting out Sonny Black to Sonny Red. He was helping Sonny Red. I don't think that was accurate, though. I don't think that was accurate. But his involvement in this situation down there is definitely accurate.
Right.
This is where I think Santos gets in a lot of trouble because now he's got big time law enforcement problems that he avoided most of his life. And I think because a lot of it was he was protected by the CIA and because of this massive network. So let's talk
Yeah.
about that, and then we'll talk a little bit more about Brasco.
Okay.
But we talk about Ted Shackley. He ran the JM Wave station, Billy. Okay, down there in Miami, working on the Cuba project. But when he was based in Laos, he organized the opium growing tribesmen for a war on communism, Billy. Okay, and the CIA had a 30-plus year relationship with the Golden Triangle's nationalist Chinese generals. This goes way back, Billy. And along with Traficante, they turned it into the center of a Southeast Asian heroin network. And one of the key men who was involved in this, Bill, and most of this, Bill, this information I'm getting comes from an article by a guy by the name of Robert Krisman, who used a lot of informants. And I also followed it up with the article on The Nation that I talked about earlier, and then also used some informants. But anyway, the key member, one of the key members was a young Marine, Bill, by the name of Oliver North. And I'm sure you know who that is. He comes up in Iran
Of course.
Contra.
Of
And
course.
he also would end up being Fox News military advisor,
Right. Of
which is
course.
hilarious. But Ted Shackley, he leaves Laos to run the CIA station in Saigon in Vietnam. Okay, where heroin starts flowing into Vietnam when he's there. Okay, and it's high quality heroin, flooded Vietnam. It turned an estimated 15% of the population into drug addicts.
Wow.
Yeah, and now this information is also backed up by other sources, Bill, that I had. Uh, the Army and the U.S. Narcotics Board did huge investigations into these operations here. Okay, and what happened was the U.S. Embassy in Saigon shut it down. They crushed the investigation, similar to what the CIA did with the Warren, with the Garrison investigation. They destroyed it. And future CIA Director William Colby was the second in command at the embassy at that time. And you also have to remember, Bill, two more important names were over there working in the embassy at that same time. General Ed Lansdale and Captain Westbrook from the Dallas Police that came up in the JD Tippett. And remember, there's information Lansdale was in Dealey Plaza, identified by Fletcher Prouty. But those guys were working out at the embassy, using that as cover. Westbrook is training the secret police over there. Lansdale's running special operations. So it's interesting that those guys are over there. Shackley and Traficante, though, Bill, they go back to his Miami days because remember, Donna Jam Wave, Traficante's brought into the Castro plots. He's got a relationship with Shackley. And then in 68, Santos travels to Southeast Asia. He makes a deal with the dope mavens. They're for the exclusive import rights into the U.S. And Shackley's Saigon crew, Bill, when he's there in Saigon, is Felix Rodriguez and Donald Gregg. Now, those names would surface in Iran-Contra later on, but Felix Rodriguez, Bill, is a key figure because he would end up being very close to George Bush. His name also comes up along with David Morales as possibly involved in the assassination of Che Guevara in Bolivia. Che Guevara's Castro's right hand. So it's very interesting what's going on, Bill. And also, this ties to something called the World Anti-Communist League. Now, remember, Guy Bannister's running the Anti-Communist League of the Caribbean. This is the World Anti-Communist League. That's a fascist organization, Bill. It was founded in Taiwan in 1967 by the CIA and by Taiwan intelligence. And the two who put that together is E. Howard Hunt and William Polly. Now, of course, we know E. Howard Hunt. He goes on to Watergate. There's information. He was in Dallas in November 22nd.
Right.
When Polly's name comes up, he's involved with the anti-Castro Cubans. He dies of a suspicious suicide, Bill, in that timeline where all these guys were dropping congressional investigations. But Traficante provided a lot of support for this league. And Traficante's bringing in the white heroin into the U.S. So you see, Bill, this is a massive organization. It's a massive organization, and the CIA is up to their eyeballs in it. And basically, the CIA and Traficante, they basically wrestle control of these networks that were once controlled by these generals in the Golden Triangle, and they basically just take it over, Billy. Okay, and remember what we talked about with Steve Kopesky, and he talked about Joe Valachi's testimony, that a lot of it was scrubbed to kind of protect the drug empire. And this is what we also talked about with James Day, Bill, where they try to put out that image where, the mafia is really not involved in drugs, this and that.
Right.
And I think a lot of it has to do with CIA was really partnering with these guys in these operations, Billy. And this is why I think Santos escapes that when everybody's dying in the 70s. He escapes this because he didn't say nothing that incriminated the CIA. He just said, I was an interpreter. We weren't doing anything wrong. And then, he's still valuable because he's the key man in this huge heroin network. So then he gets into problems, though, Bill, with the Donnie Brasco thing. And that's where, like you talked about, with Joe Pistone, and that whole thing goes down. And then right after that is when Santos has his heart attack, Bill.
Yeah.
So again, you have to question. Now, he was elderly at the time. His health wasn't great. So it's possible that heart attack just could have been just what it is, a heart attack. But it's also possible, Bill, like, again, the CIA got very lucky there because if Santos is brought in at his age, right, and he goes down in the Donnie Brasco thing, do you think he's going to spend his last days in jail, or do you think he might say, hey, I got something I want to tell you here?
Right.
So, you just have to ask yourself that question, Bill. So anything else, buddy, before we go on to the big guy or the little guy?
Why don't we take a quick break before we do that, Sean, just to get in our sponsor, and we'll be right back.
We will be right back.
Hey, Sean, I want to make sure that everybody knows about our Patreon. I know we mention it every once in a while on the show, but really important that people check out our Patreon. If you go to Patreon and search for That's Enough Out of You, or just click on the link in the description, you'll find we do an extra episode every week called The Speakeasy, and it's really usually just Sean and I kind of talking about the day's events, current events, and things like that. But a lot of exciting things. I mean, I know, Sean, you're constantly putting articles up there on our Patreon.
Yeah, and sometimes, Bill, we do bring on special guests. We had Dave Whelan on, we had Scranton Dave, and every now and then we bring Patreon members on. We've had different members, Scott Alfieri, Michael Pilch, Dan Hankey was on. So, there's an opportunity there if you want to come on the show with us. So there's a lot of things we're doing. Like you mentioned, Bill, the articles. I put articles up on a free site, but I also put articles on Patreon that's not available on the free site. We have a lot of times I put up future intel about guests that we have coming up and stuff that we have coming up on the podcast. And, we created a great community there, Bill. There's a lot of chat goes on there. There's a community chat and a lot of the comments back and forth. Just the Patreon members always have great insight. So it's a community, Bill, and it's an opportunity for people to join for a really good price, Bill.
Yeah, I mean, you can't beat it. You can certainly become a free member if you want to. There's also tiered levels with subscription amounts, and just for $1 that gets you everything. I mean, the $1 gets you everything, including our weekly show. There's other tiers. I think, Sean, what is there? A $3 tier?
$3, there's a $5, there's a $10. I mean, and there's a $50 if people could afford to give $50.
Yeah, I mean, totally up to you. Once you join, you can make that decision, and certainly, there's no commitment. I mean, you could join for a month or 2 months or whatever you want, and then you can switch your subscription around. Totally up to you. I mean, that's, people love Patreon for that reason. It really is. It makes it easy. It's kind of, however you want to do it, however you want to join. And we certainly appreciate anybody who joins our Patreon and supports the show, because we definitely, Sean, we're not getting rich off of this podcast, that's for sure. But we definitely, appreciate any support that we get from our listeners.
And, we also have our merchandise store. If people want to check out, we have the shirt that I have on now. We have mugs up there. We have cups, hats, anything you can do to help the podcast grow. We also have a bookshop up there, Bill, where all the authors that we have on our podcast, we have their books up. And it supports local bookstores, Bill. The money goes to local bookstores, a little bit to us, and then to the publisher and to the author. So it's a real good opportunity instead of buying Amazon and making
supporting billionaires.
Right, sure. There's an opportunity. And as far as Patreon, one last thing, Bill, if you want to join as a free member, we do put some stuff up there for the free members, and then if you like it and you want to upgrade, you can do that.
Absolutely. So definitely check out our Patreon. Like I said, there's a link in the description to our Patreon, or you can just go to Patreon and search for That's Enough Out of You, look for our logo, and just fill in the information and you can join. All right. That's it, Sean. We appreciate all of our Patreon members, and we hope that you guys will consider checking it out if you haven't joined. Thank you.
Buddy.
Hey, Sean, before we move on, I just want to mention our sponsor, one of our sponsors, DK's Corner, located in Jessup, Pennsylvania. Right on Cherry Street, 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania. Sean, I had a cheesesteak, and I know the ads always mention the cheesesteaks, and we've had a few listeners comment on that. I actually just had one yesterday, and I thought
you were on a diet.
I am. Well, the thing is, at work now, we've been ordering from DK's, and I keep smelling, everybody's ordering these cheesesteaks, and I keep smelling them. So yesterday fantastic. I broke down, and I had to have one.
It's all right.
It's just, I'll tell you what, Sean, just delish. I love DK's Corner cheesesteaks. Dave makes everything himself there. Everything is so fresh. All the food he makes is just incredibly delicious. It's such a really a great menu too. I mean, it
is, Bill. He gets really creative with a lot of the specials he has.
Yeah.
He has really good stuff, and his pizza's fantastic, but he always has incredible specials, Bill.
And there's always different things there that, you always have to make sure you check, go on, look on Facebook, DK's Corner on Facebook, because he's always got different specials, different things. He's
constantly changing the menu. Constantly.
And that's what, keeps it fresh, keeps everything good. So he has breakfast. He has these breakfast bowls in the morning. They're delicious. Everything, like I said, everything he makes is great. He's got kind of a unique cooler in there with different sodas and stuff like that, different drinks. So make sure you call or stop by in Jessup. Again, it's 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania. If you're local here in Northeast Pennsylvania, make sure that you stop by and check out DK's Corner. Again, just delicious food, Sean. I know you order from there a lot too.
I order constantly from there, Bill, and so many times that I sent people there. My brother went there, loved it. I had other people. Nathan loves it there. It's just a great place. Sometimes I take it out. Sometimes I even sit there. It's really comfortable. But we get so many people, Bill, listeners and stuff that said, "Oh, I went to DK's and it was great." I can't tell you how many people. We just had a question episode where people were talking about it. It's just unbelievable place. So definitely check that out.
All right, definitely check out DK's Corner. Go to Facebook, look up DK's Corner. Again, he's located at 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania. DK's Corner. All right, we are back here on That's Enough Out of You. And Sean, before we talk about Carlos Marcello, just want to really quick, for the benefit of Johnny Crabtree or whatever the heck his name is, we are not,
Clay Patch.
What's that?
Johnny Clay Patch? Is that it?
Clay Patch? Is that his name?
Yeah, I think it's Johnny Clay Patch. Or Jimmy Clay Patch? Maybe it's Jimmy. I don't know.
Whatever his name is. This is not. We're not making these guys out to be heroes.
Yeah.
They are criminals, and they they live their lives as criminals. They stole, they killed people.
The drugs is as bad as it gets.
Absolutely.
They're bringing in. This is a massive drug network. Massive.
Right.
International.
Yeah. So just take it easy with that stuff.
Yeah, relax. But all right, before we get to Marcello, Bill, I don't know Marcello. I couldn't find his involvement in that network, that drug network with Traficante. I'm not saying it's not there. I just couldn't find anything. We know Marcello had money in the casinos in Cuba. Traficante's the point man there with Meyer Lansky. I also don't know if Meyer Lansky was involved in that drug network. It would make sense he would be, but again, and the other thing is I don't know if that network is connected to the Giancana network because some of the names overlap, but I couldn't find a direct connection. And I also think one thing I want to throw out there on Lansky, Bill, remember I talked about the Oni Madden machine that he established down in Arkansas. And when he dies in 65, that machine continues to go on. Well, I'm looking into the fact that I think Meyer Lansky ended up running that and taking that over after Madden died. And that's why it continued. But yeah, so let's talk about Marcello. And let's talk about what we can prove in, we already talked about some of the myths, but let's get into detail on him. So he's born in Tunis, Bill, 1910, French Tunisia, and he's born Callegrio Menacor. He's the son of Sicilian immigrants, and he moves to Jefferson Parish, New Orleans, which I said is outside of Garrison's jurisdiction. Okay? As a kid, he's involved in petty crimes. He goes to juvie as a teenager. He's a mastermind, Bill, of this armed robbery ring that's going on in these small towns in Louisiana. Now, he's only a young kid. He's only like 14 or 15. And then he gets out. He's convicted of assault and robbery, gets out of prison. He does 5 years, though, in the Louisiana State Pen. And he's called the little man, Bill, because he's only about 5'2", 5'3", tiny little guy, stocky build. But he gets noticed by Sly Carolla. Sly Carolla is the boss of the New Orleans La Cosa Nostra family. Actually, the oldest family, Bill, on record in the United States. They actually were started there before the commission in New York, before anybody. The New Orleans is the oldest family, Bill, with ties back to Sicily. And then in 1947, Carolla is deported back to Sicily, and he names Marcello as the boss to take over. But he's not officially the boss until he's approved by the New York Commission, Bill. And this is important. And that's where Frank Costello comes in. And Frank Costello is the biggest backer of Marcello, and he approves and gets the other commission members to approve of Marcello. And this is important, Bill, because a lot of people with these mob did it theories and make Marcello the mastermind. They want to really make him an important figure, kind of like the guys do with Giancana. And I'm not saying he's not powerful in the South, but he's not even close to the level of New York, Bill. Remember, he's got to get approval from New York and everything. So let's pump the brakes when you're talking about how, this guy's really running the United States. He's powerful in the South. He's not powerful when you compare him to the commission.
Right.
But he does build an illegal gambling network in the South with a lot of help from Frank Costello. Costello backs him with the slot machines. Meyer Lansky's involved as well. He's very close with Lansky. Uh, of course, he's very close with Trafficante. He's close with the Dixie Mafia, Bill. He builds connections with them. Later, he makes a deal with Tony Accardo in Chicago for a cut of the Vegas scheme, because remember, Chicago's running Vegas at this time, in exchange for muscle used in real estate deals in the South. So Marcello's big in real estate in the South. He's big at taking over. He's got a lot of legitimate businesses too, Billy. And then again, he's not on the level of Chicago, though, and he's not on the level of New York. And people got to understand that. And then you got the Kafarver Committee. He's called before that. He takes the fifth, like, I don't know, 15 times or something like that. Or maybe, no, it was like, I think it was actually like 100 times, Bill. He took the fifth, 150 times or whatever. Didn't talk, didn't say anything. Of course, the Kennedys are on that. They come after him, John and Bobby. But he takes his family to new heights, Bill. We mentioned that Dallas was not a satellite. He was close with the Dallas. They were in the Sunbelt Mafia, but he has satellites in Alabama, Memphis, Tennessee, Biloxi, Mississippi, big gambling areas. And again, it's a small family, but he has a lot of associates. He's called the McClellan Committee. JFK and RFK hammer him, Billy. And then, the Castro plots, Bill. And this is where it gets really interesting, because a lot of authors put Marcello into the Castro plots. I have never seen any documentation. I have read so many documents on the CIA declassified documents on the Castro plots. I've never seen Marcello's name. And just because he's close with Traficante, they just assume that he's involved in these plots. And there's just no record of it, Bill. Now, he's kind of connected to that New Orleans network that Guy Bannister's running with the CIA. There's kind of an overlap there. Guys, a lot of the anti-Castro Cubans that are running around in that area, they have some connection to Marcello. Of course, we know Bannister and Farry are working for Marcello's lawyer for a time there, but there's nothing to directly involve him in the Castro plots or with the CIA, Bill, that I've ever found. But the one connection to the government is from William Pepper. William Pepper wrote a great book on Martin Luther King assassination. He tries to tie Marcello into that conspiracy. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But what he says is that Marcello had a relationship to U.S. Special Forces. And an investigative reporter by the name of Steve Tompkins is Pepper's source on this. And he said a group of Special Forces grunts involved in gun running activities in New Orleans. It was coordinated by a master sergeant, and the sale of weapons were sent to the Marcello family. Okay, they were delivered to barge in a cove that was bordering property that was owned by Marcello. Zippy Zip Chimento, one of Marcello's guys, was supposedly the guy that handled it. You like that name, Billy?
That's a great one.
So the Zip is the guy that was handling this for Marcello, supposedly. Soldiers were given the name of a guy by the name of Joe Coppola in case there was any trouble transporting the weapons. And Coppola was a commissioner of the Louisiana Highway Patrol. So he was supposedly protected on this. This is what Pepper says. Now, it comes down to, do we believe this guy Tompkins? Do we believe the source? And the other thing I'm saying, Bill, is do we also think that U.S. Special Forces grunts would be behind something like this? Because when I hear this story, to me, this sounds like a CIA operation or like an intel operation. But again, there's nothing directly to connect it to. And there's nothing like, again, I don't know if I trust the source. I need more documentation on this to know if this whole thing is true. And the other thing is, and listen, I love William Pepper's work. I think he did some great work on the Martin Luther King assassination. So who am I to criticize him? But I think he made some mistakes there, Bill. I think, he tries to involve Marcello in with the Ku Klux Klan. I've never seen. I'm not denying that he did, but I haven't seen evidence. Why would Marcello was worried about money? He's not worried about racist ideology. He's going to work with anybody that he can make money with.
Right, of course.
Of course. And with the thing when they bring him into the Martin Luther King assassination bill, and they bring some names in. I think Pepper makes a mistake here because I think guys in the Dixie Mafia were involved in the Martin Luther King plot with intelligence and with the military bill. And I think they have a long history of that. And I think the mistake is that he's confusing that with Marcello because a lot of people confuse the Dixie Mafia with the Sunbelt Mafia. Totally different organizations. They do work together, but I don't see Marcello's involvement in Martin Luther King. I just don't see it, Bill. I don't see his involvement in the Kennedy assassination. We're going to talk about that. And I don't see any documentation that proves he worked with the CIA. Now, I'm not saying there isn't any. I just show me the evidence, Billy. Show me the evidence. I don't want to hear, all kind of stories from people that are known to tell lies.
Right. Of course.
And here's the other thing, Bill. Unlike Traficante, and unlike Giancana when he went to Mexico, do you remember Giancana had a lot of problems in the U.S. with law enforcement? When he went to Mexico, his problems went away until finally 9 years after he's brought back to the States, and that's when his problems start again. But Traficante doesn't have a lot of problems with the law. They're always after him, but they could never make a case. He's protected. Marcello has a lot of problems with law enforcement, Bill. He always did. So if he's working with the CIA, they're not doing a great job of protecting him. And let's talk about some of his problems. So in 1961, according to journalist Drew Pearson, the Justice Department, under the direction of Robert Kennedy, okay, apprehended and deported Marcello. And they deported him to Guatemala, Bill. Now there's all kind of stories that they picked him up in the middle of the night illegally, dropped him in the middle of the woods, and he's running around without his shoes. Yeah, it's like, what is legend and what is truth, Billy? I have no idea. There's so much mud flung in this that it's hard to know what really happened there. I know in 1963, Marcello tried to defraud the government with a false Guatemalan passport, okay, or a false Guatemalan birth certificate, and he was actually indicted, and this is what he was on trial with when Bannister and Ferry were helping his lawyer, and he's acquitted the day JFK is killed, Bill. So kind of like Giancana, he's got a lot of legal problems leading up to the Kennedy assassination, right? So if he's a mastermind in this conspiracy, boy, he's really got a lot of time on his hands for a guy that's under heavy indictment and could be deported,
Yeah.
We talked about, and also the Garrison Notes, Bill. There is Marcello in the Garrison Notes, so it's not like he ignored Marcello like people say. But he had a lot of law enforcement problems, and then in 1966, 13 members of La Cosa Nostra from different families, from the New York Commission, from New Orleans, from Florida, they were arrested, Bill, with consorting with known criminals, and they're arrested at the La Stella restaurant in Queens. Okay, now the important thing about this, Bill, is there's a famous photograph, Bill, with Trafficante and Marcello, and you've probably seen it. And Frank Regano, the lawyer's there, and a couple guys from New York, and they're toasting, okay? And people in the mob did it theory use that picture to say they're celebrating the Kennedy assassination. And they make it look like that picture was taken right soon after Kennedy was killed.
Right.
66, Bill.
3 years later, yeah.
Yeah. So see how deceiving these people can be?
Sure.
But anyway, what happens is charges are dropped, but Marcello, he returns to New Orleans, and he gets off the plane, and he gets in a fight with an FBI agent, Bill, and he throws a punch. And there's a famous picture there of Marcello, tiny little guy, he's throwing a punch at this like 6'4" FBI agent, a big roundhouse. He misses by a mile, but he's arrested, Bill. The trial results in a hung jury. But then he's retried and he's convicted and he serves 6 months. Okay. And then law enforcement, he gets out, law enforcement's targeting him again. And then in 1981, Marcello Aubrey Young, who was the former aide to Louisiana Governor McKeithen, a guy by the name of Charles Romer, the former commissioner of administration to Governor Edwards. So you can see there's a powerful network of politicians he's in with. Okay. Uh, and plus 20 other people, Bill, with powerful political connections outside of the mafia, Bill. This is mostly Marcello and a bunch of politicians. They're all indicted with conspiracy, racketeering, mail and wire fraud, in a scheme to bribe state officials. And they were going to give them multi-million dollar insurance contracts, Bill. And it was all a scam. They're caught by an FBI sting. And here's the interesting thing, Bill. Of all the people that were arrested, 20 some people, only Marcello and one other person was convicted. The rest weren't. So to me, Bill, I see Marcello's getting hung out to dry. Like if he's being protected for some kind of involvement with the CIA, they're doing a sloppy job.
Right.
So he goes to prison, and this is when now his health problems start. He starts an onset of dementia. He has all, he's starting to have hallucinations. His health is very bad. He has a series of strokes. Um, Finally, he's released. 1993, Bill. They give him what do you call that? Compassionate release, where they send him to his home. He
That's
gets
right.
last days there, and this is where these guys, Gino Minari, go to his house and they see this Ed Becker there meeting him for the first time. So that story couldn't have been true. But Marcello dies, Bill. You know, at his home quietly, and that's pretty much the New Orleans mob. It tries to carry on for a few years after that, and there's some loose connections that's come up recently and stuff. But basically, when Marcello dies, that family dies.
Right.
So, any questions on Marcello, Bill? Because I know there's a lot of legend about him. There's a lot of, but again, I got to see some documentation. Like you have all these declassified documents on the Castro's plots with the CIA mob plots, but why isn't Marcello mentioned?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So again, this is why I definitely don't see him as a mastermind because it doesn't fit with what we know with, the recent information on Harvey, on Angleton, Helms, Dulles, Phillips. Marcello really doesn't fit unless you could give me more. Now, Traficante is working with these guys. Traficante definitely fits because, he's in with Lewis MCWillie, who's friends with Ruby. He has more connections to Ruby than Marcello does.
Hmm.
That's another thing the Mob Didic guys do. They try to really, really stretch connections to tie Marcello to Ruby. And it's really a stretch to do so, Billy. Another name I want to mention, though, Bill, I mentioned it earlier, Joe Civello from Dallas. He ran the LCN in Dallas. It wasn't a satellite of Marcello, even though it's kind of like Milwaukee was to Chicago or Philly is to New York.
Right.
Like he's going to be subservient to Carlos in Santos, but he's still running his own family. It's not a satellite. It's not like Carlos had in Alabama or Memphis, Tennessee, or one of those other places. But Joe Civello was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He moves to Dallas in the roaring 20s. Him and his cousins get involved in bootlegging. They have huge bootlegging operations in Dallas. And in 1956, Civello takes over the LCN. Um, he's detained at Appalachian, like a lot of these guys were. He has a very small family, but Dallas is an open area, though. You got guys like Jack Ruby. You got a lot of independent operators operating there. He works, with this loose connection of criminals down there. He expanded into legitimate businesses. 1970, he died of natural causes. Not a lot, a lot of people try to bring him into these mob did it theories. He was close to Ruby. There's no denying that. There's telephone conversations between the two. So he definitely did business with Ruby. That's not debatable. But to bring him into a plot to kill Kennedy, I don't see any evidence. And this guy, basically, when you talk about mob bosses, Bill, he's down in the bottom of the powerful Cosa Nostra bosses. The 26 families, he might be number 26.
Right.
So I don't see him involved. So to wrap it up, Bill, conclude all this, like Mark Adams, I got a conversation with him, and he talked about how Marcello and Trafficante, maybe they thought they were running things with the Kennedy assassination through Roselli. Because remember, everything's running through Johnny Roselli. Roselli is close to Trafficante. He is close to Marcello, not as close as he is with Trafficante. But I guess that's possible. But again, I know Roselli's also involved in the casinos and stuff, but I don't know. I just don't see, Bill, any evidence that Marcello's involved with the CIA, and I don't see how does he fit as being a mastermind in the Kennedy assassination with what we know about with Harvey and Angleton, all these guys. We know who masterminded it.
Right.
Also, for him to just even be involved, to me, is a stretch, Bill. Now, Trafficante is a little bit more believable, but I think that Trafficante's value to the CIA is this huge network he had in Southeast Asia. Same with Giancana. And that's what the CIA wanted to protect. Now, Giancana gets whacked at 75. Santos lives to 87. Why he must have been more valuable, assuming that we think, Trafficante, the heart attack really wasn't a heart attack, but maybe it was just a heart attack.
Yeah.
He wasn't in great health. But again, Bill, I got to see more documentation to prove, Marcello's involved with the CIA. Maybe that gun operation they had, maybe that was run by the CIA. I'm not saying it wasn't. I just want more proof.
Right.
I mean, there's so much legend around these guys, and I think tonight, we gave a more accurate portrayal than you've seen on other shows and stuff, because we're not gonna just believe stories. We're gonna use documentation. We're gonna use sources that we could confirm.
Right.
We're not gonna believe people like John Davis, who I believe has an agenda. He had an agenda, and a lot of these mob did it guys do.
Yep. All right. Well, Sean, good job as usual. Great research. And,
And again, Bill, it goes down to just think about why did Carlos have all these legal troubles and Santos didn't? You know what I mean? And again, Giancana had a lot of legal trouble until he went to Mexico. Then he's kind of immune for 9 years. But again, they don't have really jurisdiction, but still the Mexican officials were looking the other way.
Right.
It seems to me like they were getting protected and Carlos wasn't. So I don't see, I got to see more evidence. Show me more evidence. And again, he's a powerful boss, Bill, in the South. And so was Santos, but they're not as powerful as the commission. And their families were pretty small, Bill. Even though now Santos' network and the drug operation was huge, but it just didn't involve his family. That involved that's why the CIA was heavily involved in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of moving parts with that, Billy.
All right. Well, Sean, great job. Great research. If you guys have any questions or comments, please put them in the comment section. Send your questions to Sean, because we will get to them in our next question and answer episode next time we do one. But all right, Sean, good job.
All right. Good night, everybody.
All right. Good night.
That's Enough Out of You podcast is executive produced and written by Bill Rader and Sean Kane and edited by Bill Rader. The That's Enough Out of You podcast and logo are exclusive property of Bags of Chicken, LLC. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or accounts of this podcast without the express written consent of Bags of Chicken, LLC is prohibited. So don't even try it.